Today, there are more than 100,000 children and young people in the UK care system. For many, this means moving away from their schools, their communities, their relatives and friends, leading to feelings of isolation. At Family Rights Group, we're trying to change this. Through our Lifelong Links programme, we're working with local authorities to help children and young people in care find or rebuild relationships with relatives and other significant individuals in their lives. Our goal is to ensure that they have a positive support network to rely on throughout their childhood and beyond. The Lifelong Links model has been co-created with children in care in order to get the best outcome for every young person involved. We support local authorities to safely implement Lifelong Links by training staff to become coordinators, publishing guidance and providing consultancy support. Once trained, a coordinator works with a child to find the people most important to them. With the child and their social workers agreement, the coordinator brings all these people together at a family group conference. Here, the child, their family and friends make a long-term plan for how the child's relationships can continue to grow. Since 2017, more than 1,000 children and young people have participated in Lifelong Links, and we're seeing real impact. Local authorities report that it's resulting in the young people increasing their support networks significantly. The University of Oxford has found that almost 3/4 of children are still in the same foster care or children's home a year later, compared to 41% of those who haven't accessed Lifelong Links. And almost 80% of the children and young people taking part feel an improved sense of identity after finding out more about their family roots. The benefits of Lifelong Links to children and young people are not something that you can put a price on. However, an analysis of the programme did show it has a cost benefit. Our aim is that every child in care is offered Lifelong Links. Help make a difference to young people's lives by finding out how you can introduce Lifelong Links in your area.
Brilliant. I think we're going to move next to Pam Ledward.
Yeah, so hi everybody. So I am a Principal Social Work Advisor and the Programme Director for Lifelong Links and FTCs in the UK. And just to give a bit of context to how a Family Rights Group developed Lifelong Links, just wanted to start with, for those of you who don't know FRG, Family Rights Group, we are a national charity working in the UK. And our mission is to create a more socially just society in which the child welfare and family justice systems support children to live safely and thrive within their family, whilst also strengthening the family and community networks of those children who can't live at home. And obviously Lifelong Links fits into the latter part of that mission statement. Lifelong Links aims to ensure that any child in care has a positive support network around them to help them during their time in care and into adulthood. That's the aim of Lifelong Links, which started, we were involved in the care inquiry back in 2013, which found that the care system tends to break relationships with children in care rather than sustain or build those relationships. And from that care inquiry, we started to think about what could be the possible solution to that. And we were very fortunate in 2016 to get funding from a funder, which enabled us with local authorities and other key stakeholders, including parents, foster carers, children in care, care leavers, social workers and local authorities and academics. And we kind of spent 12 months looking at what would be a model that could work in this country. And the child, Sean will talk to the operational model that you can see in front of you, but the main kind of key point with Lifelong Links is that it's child-centred, and that came across really, really strongly from those young people that we spoke to. That they wanted some control in this process. So this is not a bureaucratic process. It doesn't have timescales that fit the bureaucracy's needs. It's all around what works for the child. We trialled lifelong links with innovation funding for 3 years in England, and we've got a 5-year trial with 5 local authorities in Scotland, and 13 local authorities in the end in England were part of the trial, which was independently evaluated by the Reece Centre at the University of Oxford, as you've just seen on the film. And you've seen the key sort of findings from that evaluation. And Celsius in the University of Strathclyde in Scotland is doing the independent evaluation of the 5 local authorities in Scotland. We had the trial criteria works. We had to have trial criteria where the aim was to offer lifelong links to children in care who'd been in care for less than 3 years, for whom there was no plan to return home, and they were under 16. And that trial criteria is now gone, but that's what the trial was focused on. All the local authorities we worked with were very different. So some kind of London boroughs to large county authorities, and they all had different practice systems. So some had very clear practice systems, and others had, you know, much more general. And it works in any local authority. We are now working with 15 local authorities in England, 2 in Wales, 5 in Scotland, and we're talking to local authorities in other jurisdictions. We designed the trial so that it would not just be a standalone model that worked with family group conferences, but that it would achieve system change. So stakeholders, again, when we're implementing lifelong links in a local authority, we have designed it such that the stakeholders are key to the implementation and policy design for lifelong links. Currently, we've got 1,500 children who've now benefited from lifelong links, which is great. And we are developing resources so that lifelong links can benefit care leavers. And we're about to start a project working with young care leavers in the prison estate in one part of England. We have developed resources for offering lifelong links to disabled children who've experienced a breakdown in adoption, young children. So the youngest child who's ever received lifelong links is 3. And local authorities are now trialling it with care leavers. But our key point whenever we're discussing with local authorities, it's why wait. So we would always say offer lifelong links as soon as you can, as soon as a child comes into care, so you're not losing those relationships for children. So that would still be our advice. We are, so we're now sort of talking to lots of local authorities and thinking about how lifelong links may be helpful to children who aren't in care, but maybe children on the edge of care, or maybe at risk of sexual exploitation. Or so that's where we're at the moment. I'm going to hand over now to Sean, who's going to talk you through the model.
Hi there. So my name's Sean Hurst. I'm a practice lead for family group conferencing and lifelong links at Family Rights Group. I'm going to talk through the process of very briefly, just to say there's a lot of information about lifelong links on the FRG website, including quite a lot of different media materials as well. So basically the process, the operational model, has a number of stages, from kind of preparation and planning for the intervention through to what we've defined as discovery and then engagement of the young person's network, through to convening an FGC and then incorporating the decision making from the FGC into local authority planning for the young person going forward, and possibly then a review family group conference following that. So I'll just go through the detail of each of those stages. So the referral comes through to the FGC service, and lifelong link services are embedded within family group conference services, drawing on the expertise of existing family group conference coordinators. So the referral is made to the service. There's a kind of screening discussion of the referral, leading to a planning meeting, and in every single lifelong links case there will be a planning meeting, and the planning meeting really is a professionals meeting with the purpose of setting out the intervention, taking the individual young person's situation forward. So it's thinking about the support needs of the young person, thinking about the support needs of the carer, thinking about any kind of key issues that need to be addressed in taking forward the work, and thinking about any risk issues, but also a kind of primary sort of purpose of the planning meeting is to make sure that everybody is on the same page. You have this sort of notion of being is everybody aligned together in terms of common purpose for what needs to happen, and really to sort of iron out any any sort of challenges in terms of views going forward at that point before you embark directly on the work. Once that's all been determined, then you move into the direct work with the young person, and we've set that out as initially we defined it as discovery work, moving on to engagement work. And the purpose of discovery really is to work with the young person, to work with the young person's family, to extend the network of support, to find what the potential connections are for that young person going forward. Quite a bit of that is what we would is drawing on traditional FGC work, so it's mapping networks. We use a series of tools. They're listed on the slide there. So we do a lot of mapping of the family and engagement with the family around their own network, and we use an online mapping tool, Geno Pro, which through that we're able to represent the network that's available to the young person and also describe the nature of those connections, including identifying where there may be risk and having conversations with young people about that risk as well. But also mobility mapping, where we use a tool to pictorially represent the journey that the young person's been on in their life, focusing particularly on places where they've lived and having conversations then about what the significant relationships might have been for that young person in relation to those different times in their life, and drawing out information about potential contacts that we might have moving forward. And we use timelines, but another key tool is the social connection tool, which is the tool that we developed as part of this work, drawing on some initial work that had been done in the US. And the social connections tool it's an online tool now. It's very accessible. And the purpose of the social connection tool is to get a picture of that young person's existing relationships at that point, but also how their needs are addressed by that network, who they would go to for particular kinds of support. So it's a very useful tool in terms of getting a focus on the young person's current relationships, but also where they would get support, but also where the gaps are in that support. And the social connections tool it's a tool for lifelong links, but it's a tool that also we would hope that social workers more generally would use as a tool for mapping the young person's support network at any one point. So, but in lifelong links, we use the social connections tool at the initial beginning of the work, and then subsequently 6 months and 12 months after that. So the process of constantly going back to look at that network of support. So once we've done that work and we've identified possible connections that we can establish or reconnect with and help to reconnect with for the young person, we then move to the next stage, which is engagement. So it's initially having conversations with the young person about next steps, having conversations with the young person's social worker. So we would not, as a coordinator, you wouldn't be making any contact with anybody or moving forward without checking that with the young person and checking it with the young person's social worker as well. But assuming that's okay, then we begin to engage with that network with the purpose of bringing in that network as particularly in relation to the FGC. So what ways can that network support the young person going forward, and having having conversations with people in the hope that you're able to draw them together in a family group conference. And the family group conference is very much a celebratory event. It's focusing on the young person's needs going forward, compared with a traditional FGC. A traditional FGC would be focused on responding to a concern. A Lifelong Links FGC is very celebratory, and it's very kind of future focused, if you like. In what ways can that network of support, which would be potentially family members, but it may be previous workers that have worked with the young person, it may be previous carers. In what way can they have an ongoing relationship to that young person going forward, and how can they provide support going forward? Once we've had the FGC, a plan is made, and then that we were then looking for that plan to be incorporated into other decision making within the authority, and it becomes part of the care plan and is reviewed within the planning process. So we would hope that that becomes really central to that young person's needs going forward. Okay. That's fine. Well, I think that's a sort of description of the model, and we have a Q&A bit at the end. We can come back to
Wonderful.
any
And I think we're
queries
moving
that
on
people
to
might
Ethan
have. So
now.
I'll stop there. Thank you.
Is that all right?
Morning.
Oh, I'm in the blur. I really like that.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Becky, and I'm currently working with my young person here, Ethan, as a lifelong links coordinator in Birmingham. And we're here today just to talk about the work we've done together and how that's had a positive impact on Ethan. So we've kind of known each other for about nearly a year now. Ethan's been in care since for the last 4.5 years.
Too.
And he wasn't having any sort of form of contact with any of his family, and that was one of the main reasons why he wanted to participate in the Lifelong Links project. So if we're just going to have like a conversation about kind of, you know, the work we've been doing, what that's kind of meant to him, and how he feels about taking part in a Lifelong Links. So Ethan, if you want to just let everybody know kind of how it's sort of impacted on your life.
I'm off asleep. It's been good because when I went into care, I had no links with any of my family, and then Lifelong Links got involved near the end, like 2 years in or something. I don't remember. And then they came in, and then it was quite a quick thing, and they helped to spell my name wrong. Helped to find my family quite quick. Yeah, I don't know what I said. Obviously.
Yeah, so what we did was I kind of spent some time doing some direct work with Ethan, finding out who he wanted to connect with, who he wanted to re-link with. Sadly, you know, both of his parents had sort of passed away, hadn't they? But he didn't have any closure about to where they were. So that was kind of one of the first tasks that we did, and since then Ethan's been able to go and visit where his parents are placed. And then he has got sort of siblings, one on dad's side and one on his mum's side. So we I managed to track down his sister on his dad's side. We went to visit, didn't we?
Yeah.
Went to London, so she lives in London, and we've managed to reconnect with her, which has been really positive for him, because it's kind of given him that sense of where he's from. They were able to share memories about their dad. You know, it was nice that they, you know, there was that look where they looked like each other, and the common things that they had in common with each other. And then we, in the process of Ethan's other sister, who was adopted, which was a bit more difficult because obviously we had to sort of wait for his other sister to see whether it was something that she wanted to participate in. And yes, so I've managed to connect with her. She's now got a worker of her own who's supporting her, so I'm supporting Ethan from this end. So it's a very joined up piece of work. We've started by letter writing, so they're both exchanging letters now, and we're slowly getting to know each other, and we're hopefully then going to be meeting in the near future. Ethan's now met his uncles. He's got quite a large extended maternal family, and one particular uncle's been really supportive to Ethan. Now he's come out of foster care, and he's in his first independent living. So it kind of shows now that this is where I think that it can really support our care leavers, 18 plus, or coming up to care, because it's nothing like sort of having your own family to sort of link with, know where you're from. And they're kind of giving him that support now where you know, they're a phone call away, they can pop round if there's a piece of advice he wants. So when all the professionals leave his life when he's 18, which he's quite looking forward to.
Yeah.
However, it's nice that there's going to be somebody there that's going to sort of fill that gap. He's met his grandparents, and that was kind of nice, wasn't it? We went for a coffee. So we kind of do everything where it's all young person led. It's up to him, you know, sort of like we discuss venues or what he would like to do, how he'd like that to look. You know, is it a case of building up through phone calls or video calls, and then we go on to sort of meeting them if that's how he'd kind of like it to look like. So I don't know if you want to say anything else about kind of encouraging. We're kind of really trying to encourage IROs to think about that as part of the care planning, maybe include, you know, if they identify any young people that have not seen any relatives within their sort of family and friends part of pathway planning, you know, just so that we can try and link them back up. And that can be foster carers. Ethan had quite a good connection with his foster carer, so she's going to be part of the lifelong link. She's invited him for Christmas this year if he, you know, if he wants to go. That's an opportunity for him. You know, we're just trying to encourage IROs to really think about, you know, some of the young people that aren't seeing anybody, and if they're not, then maybe, or it's not safe or suitable, then we can sort of look at those external agencies of independent visitors, or, you know, sometimes it's friends. I've got another young person kind of working with who wanted to speak to a teacher. So it's really flexible in terms of the kinds of people that young people want to sort of reconnect with. One of the people Ethan wanted to connect with was a lady who was the ambulance person, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Who, when his, you know, his dad was in a bit of need, he remembered that she was really kind to him. So, you know, I've managed to sort of track down her, and we're hoping that they'll sort of eventually maybe exchange a card. You really just want to say thank you to her, didn't you? Because it was somebody, even though it was like 4.5 years ago, was a person that stuck in his mind as a positive person for him. So, don't know, is there anything else you want to mention?
No, you just waffled on for it. No.
Okay. But yeah, I think, and for me, it's kind of been, you know, it's a real journey with the young people. I'm kind of passionate about, you know, the children and young people having that connection and identity, you know, where they're from, their heritage, where, you know, where they come from, and to give them that additional support and meaning. So I think it's sort of a really worthwhile, you know, experience for our young people. I think at the end of the day, you know, that they are family, and if they're safe to reconnect, it's been positive. And Birmingham, I think we've got around 52 young people that we're kind of working with at the moment.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much, Ethan. Really well. There are lots of messages really saying well. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
Oh,
me myself, yeah.
Sorry.
Finished.
Sharon, you're on mute.
I was saying thank you so much, Ethan, for coming along today and allowing your story to be shared. People in the chat messaging expressing exactly that. A big thank you for that. We're going to move on. Like I say, we've got a lot of speakers today, so I'm going to pass on now to Dr. Shirley Lewis, if I may.
Hi, yes. My name's Shirley Lewis. I'm a research officer at the Reese Centre at the University of Oxford, and I think probably some of what I'm going to say, Ethan has just explained a lot better than I will, but we'll move on anyway. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So as Sean already mentioned, there was a DFE evaluation of lifelong links, which has been worked on previously. What I've currently been working on over the summer is an extension activity which explores how lifelong links is embedded into practice. So what the kind of questions I've been asking is, what happens to those children and young people who have worked with lifelong links when the lifelong links coordinator is no longer involved with them? how are their plans embedded into their care plan or their pathway plan? And does Lifelong Links have an impact on the culture within a local authority? Next slide, please. So how I've been doing that is I've been working with 4 local authorities that have been involved with Lifelong Links for different amounts of time. So some of them have been involved right since the first pilot, and others have only recently come on board. And they've been spread throughout England, a range of shire, unitary and metropolitan boroughs. And I've been undertaking semi-structured interviews with managers, service leads, Lifelong Links team leaders and coordinators, independent reviewing officers and social workers in child looked after teams. So in terms of findings, I've still partway through my fieldwork. I've still got a few interviews to do and I've not finished analysis. So just bear in mind that these findings are preliminary at this stage. But so far, local authorities have used a range of different structures to embed Lifelong Links plans into practice. And the child's care plan and the child looked after review is really kind of key in terms of how Lifelong Links is embedded. Often independent reviewing officers and social workers have used the contact part of the child looked after review to talk about Lifelong Links, and sometimes the kind of identity parts as well. And often Lifelong Links coordinators have gone along to child looked after reviews to talk about the work they've been doing in more detail. Plans are also embedded through use of social work supervision and foster carer reviews. And also some local authorities have audits, and as part of their kind of audit work or looking at case files or speaking to young people and family members and foster carers, they'll be asking about what kind of Lifelong Links work has taken place and whether that's continued. Next slide, please. So one of the things that Lifelong Links has been really helpful with has been dealing with complexity, particularly perhaps children that lost contact with their families around the time that care proceedings were completed, and things have been perhaps really complex. Perhaps there's been very kind of difficult relationships with family members, or they've just disappeared and nobody knows where they are. And Lifelong Links has been useful in those cases, perhaps bearing in mind social worker kind of workload and capacity, and also some of the difficult relationships that social workers can sometimes have with family members. Having a worker that can devote time to finding family members and building relationships with them has been really beneficial. The next slide, please. So another way Lifelong Links has been helpful is in terms of helping children and young people come to terms with different aspects of their lives and their extended family, and offering reassurance. Sometimes Lifelong Links doesn't always lead to a plan, an ongoing plan of contact. And this example is from a young person who'd been in care from a very young age and had no contact with either of his parents. And what the Lifelong Links work was able to do was to get letters from mum and dad. And those letters weren't going to start an ongoing relationship, because the parents had very clearly said they weren't in a position to do more than offer just that kind of one letter for him. But they, at the same time, that was really helpful in that it just gave him some reassurance, let him know his parents were okay, and also answered some questions that he had around his family tree and where he was placed in that. Next slide, please. Lifelong Links could also offer support to parents who had to children and young people who'd been bereaved and lost their parents and family members. And we know that's not unusual, is it, for children who are looked after. And this example is of a young person who had some Lifelong Links work done with some extended family members. And that child's mum actually had quite a difficult relationship with those family members, and then her mum later on sadly passed away, and those family members were a real support for that young person. And if that work hadn't perhaps been done before at that early stage, that work may never have been done, because the child may not have felt comfortable actually doing lifelong links work to find family members who she knew that mum didn't have a particularly good relationship with. Whereas because that work had already been done, they were offered a kind of real support network and lifeline to her. Next slide, please. And one of the questions we were asking was around culture and the kind of ongoing impact of lifelong links. And this quote comes from a principal social worker in a local authority who has been involved in lifelong links since the pilot stage, so for quite a long time. And she was talking about how actually lifelong links had an effect not just on those particular children that were going through lifelong links, but as an organisation, it got social workers thinking about building relationships right through the system. And she was talking about a lot of different ways that they were using lifelong links with children and young people. And I know that some of them were mentioned earlier, such as with care leavers and perhaps children and young people are on the edge of care as well. And they really felt that it had kind of helped in terms of a sense of different attitudes regarding relationships. Next slide, please. So what are some of the implications for practice? And again, just bear in mind, these are preliminary findings. But one thing that was coming out very clearly in the interviews I have done is how important the role of independent reviewing officers is, both perhaps identifying children and young people to refer to lifelong links, and also then once that lifelong links work has been done, making sure that acting that they could monitor that and ensure that those plans were embedded. And I mean, independent reviewing officers are often one of the kind of more consistent people in children's lives when social workers change and come and go, and often know the history of that child or young person in great detail. And so we're often very involved in working with the lifelong links coordinators as well, in terms of sharing some of their knowledge and background that they had about the children. And participants that took part in the interviews did feel that lifelong links had made a positive difference to the lives of children and young people within the local authority. So just on the final slide is a link to the DFE evaluations. If anyone is
so
interested,
much has been really helpful.
for more information.
Anne Baxter.
Thank you.
We can have the next slide. Done it again. Anne Baxter, we're moving on to now.
Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, my system's playing up. It's Anne now. Thank you.
Is it me? Is it my turn? Okay, thanks very much. I hope everyone can hear me. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. It's Anne here. I'm Baxter, work in Leeds, and I have the IROs as one of the sort of services that I manage. Next slide, please. Just to sort of want to talk a bit about why the lifelong links landed really well with the IROs here in Leeds, and some of the sort of context within which we've been trying to work and promote better practice. We've been working hard for a number of years on better involvement of parents, better promotion of the idea of sharing PR, reaching out to dads. We work very well with the Children in Care Council and the Children's Rights Service, and children tell us that they want this sort of, they want to be connected with their wider families. We have a culture of restorative practice. We try very hard to utilise family, friends, as well as professionals in in better care planning for children and care leavers. And we have a very well established family group conference service and are working towards using some of the practice from that in improving family-led decision making. So that's the context. Next slide, please. Within Leeds, we have a very low staff turnover of IROs. I'm very fortunate with that. And as Shirley just mentioned, that means many IROs are the keepers of the child's story. A child can have had a succession of foster carers and social workers and been through numerous schools and placements up and down the country, but they've usually only had one or two IROs. So they are a really key person in promoting the child's story and holding that story as a whole story. And our IROs are very keen to promote this sense of identity of the child, and life story work's well established, and IROs closely look at whether the life story work is effective. So all of that sits really well with IROs when the idea of lifelong links comes along. We also have IROs who do, we offer care leaver reviews for 18 and 19-year-olds if they want their IRO to remain involved. And that means that our IROs have seen what happens when children and young people leave care and how professional support can fall away. So they've got that awareness as well. Next slide, please. But you know, lifelong links is not just a nice add-on to what we do. It's actually really fundamental to upholding the rights of the child. You'll all be familiar as IROs and IRO managers with the Article 8 rights, but you know, it is incumbent upon the state to re-establish their family relationships and their sense of identity. And I've just mentioned Article 9 as well there. Next slide, please. And those human rights are sort of embodied in the Children Act. It's been with us a long time now, but we still use it. And it's one of the key responsibilities of IROs to ensure that the local authority is fulfilling its responsibilities under the Children Act. And I've highlighted the sort of part of the Children Act about that general duty of the local authority to promote contact with wider family members, and you can determine what family members are, but that's the default position of the local authority in the absence of any court orders. So just the next slide, please. So we know that one of the IRO's key duties is to make sure that the local authority is fulfilling those responsibilities, those legal responsibilities, and protecting and promoting the child's human rights. So it's a really key part of the IRO role. The other part of the IRO role that sits well with lifelong links is the requirement to determine at every review whether the contact plan for the child is meeting their needs or whether anything else needs to change. And that is picked up and discussed and recorded in the IRO report. So that's a natural place, or it was for us, to talk about lifelong links and extended contact with extended family. Next slide, please. IROs will be very familiar with young people who leave care, and the only people supporting them are professionals. No matter how good a PA is, you know, it can often be one PA who might be very busy, might have 20, 25 young people to support. We'll all be familiar with young people who eventually gravitate back to their birth families anyway, with our help or without it. We'll all be familiar with young people who have a broken sort of sense of identity or a broken sense of self, who've lost that connectivity with their family, their ethnic background, their cultural background. And we'll all have encountered children, young people who will use social media anyway to search for important people who are important to them themselves. So lifelong links sort of addresses many of those issues that I think IROs will already be familiar with, and will have got children, young people on their caseloads for whom this is relevant. Next slide, please. There are some sort of things we can that we have. There are measures that we have, like record keeping, keeping good track of placements, having good life storybooks, completing genograms, including family, friends, the neighbour that used to live next door when the young person lived at home. All of those important people, keeping a record of those and having those right from the get-go is really important. We also ask children at every review consultation in Leeds, and I'm sure it's the same everywhere else, is there anyone you would like contact with that you're not having contact with? We record it and take action accordingly. Looking at contact plans for children and young people, is it very limited? Is it the sort of 6 times a year with mum, but there's no one else included in the contact plans, and yet we know there's a big family out there or a larger network? Looking at dads, we know that lots of young people become disconnected from their dads. We in Leeds particularly have a number of dads who are sadly passed away, or they might be in custody. So it's not possible to have contact with dad, but that side of the family can be connected with. And we look at pathway plans when we start to sort of review those at 16. Who will be there to support the young person in the pathway plan. And if we can see from the pathway plan that there's only professionals in there, that would be a cue really to refer to Lifelong Links to see if there are any wider family or any other members of the support network who could be part of the pathway planning. Next slide, please. I asked some of our IROs in Leeds, I'm doing this talk today. What would you like your fellow IROs across the country to hear about the Leeds IRO experience? So some of the things they sort of mentioned to me are there. They've encountered cases where Lifelong Links set out to find one group of people and found another group of people also who were interested in reconnecting with the young person. They wanted Lifelong Links plans to be shared and discussed at every review. One IRO suggested it kind of creates that complete sense of identity. So a young person is no longer just a young person in care. They are in care, but they also have they also see themselves as a member of this wider family and network. Next slide. The Leeds IROs also felt that Lifelong Links workers had the time to get involved, do the work, write the plans, and that social workers would never be able to devote that amount of time to doing the same thing. And they found the Lifelong Links workers very proactive. Lifelong Links was thought to be more organic. It feels less pressured than when we're in proceedings at the other end of the process. So often we've got young people coming into care and the local authorities looking to identify possible carers for the child, wider family, aunts, uncles, whatever. And that can be a very pressured time. And family who feel they don't want to bring the child up, they don't feel in a position to bring a child up, but they do want to offer something, but that can often be overlooked at that point at the start of the child's journey in care. But coming back to it later, when the young person's been in care for a while, those same family members can offer something. So that's really valuable. Lifelong Links is seen as neutral by families who may not have a very positive view of the local authority, but the Lifelong Links workers and the Lifelong Links process, it has that degree of independence. And someone mentioned that COVID and the way that we've been working and the way that young people have had to have remote or video contacts or family time has actually helped to promote the value of wider but less frequent contact with family and friends. So those models of contact, going down to the bowling alley and having half a day and then doing that every school holiday or whatever. Some of that's been re-looked at, hasn't it, because of COVID, and now it's a lot of young people are having sort of shorter video calls, but more frequently with people who are important to them. And Lifelong Links, has been able to sort of use some of those changes to the way in which we have been
I'm going to have to ask Anne, we need to really whip through this one, if that's
next slide. I think it's the last one. So this is I don't intend to read it out, but I think just to sort of put up an example of a young person who in Leeds has really benefited from Lifelong Links. I'm wondering whether it might be the same example that Shirley mentioned, of someone who had no contact with her birth family, doesn't know who her father is, and who, because of Lifelong Links, has been reconnected with birth family members who live in Leeds, didn't know that this girl was in care, and also who live abroad and are happy to have her over there, I think it's in the USA, for a holiday. So that's just one example. We have others, but thank you very much for the opportunity. And if you do get the chance in your local authority to
thanks
work
so much,
with the
Anne.
Lifelong
That's
Links
wonderful.
team, I
We're going to
would
move on now
highly
to
recommend it.
Tendai.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here. My name is Tendai Moe. I'm Head of Quality Assurance and Practice and Principal Social Worker in Hertfordshire. I'm just going to talk really briefly about our journey with implementing Lifelong Links in Hertfordshire and how it's benefited us. So we were one of the first local authorities to implement Lifelong Links. Back in 2016, we were part of the group of local authorities that worked with Family Rights Group to CoP Lifelong Links in the UK. And to date, we've had over 300 children who have had a Lifelong Links involvement and have been able to identify a member of their family or a huge number of people that they can connect with, which has been a really exciting journey. At the beginning, when we first heard about the idea of connecting children with their families, we were quite excited by it. At that time, we were talking in our authority about children and young people who were on their own in care, having lost contact with their relatives, particularly because we were seeing older young people who were now pregnant and having their own families and were quite isolated, and how overrepresented they were in children in child protection plans and in residential mother and baby placements. So that really was a timely project to come up at that time. We were attracted by the idea of having children and young people become emotionally stable because they have that contact with their extended family. Practice wisdom at that time was that, you need to reduce contact and family time for children in care because it would destabilize their placement. Lots of people were afraid of the impact of having Beth's family more involved with the first foster family. But at the same time, we also noticed that young people were gravitating back home to their family after leaving care, and sometimes before, because of course technology allows that, and that was being done in an unplanned and often unsafe way. So there was a lot going on at that time in Hertfordshire. We had just introduced our family safeguarding approach, and we were very interested in relationship-based practice. We wanted children to remain in their families, but we also wanted those that have left to have those relationships as well. So just the next slide, please, Jordan. So part of implementing Lifelong Links in Hertfordshire involved really meeting with young people and asking them what they thought. So we worked with our Children in Care Council, but also we talked to young people in general. We also created young people's group to co-design it. We wanted to know how we can make it work within our local authority, and we wanted young people to be the ones to tell us how to do it. And we also created a parents group. At that time, we didn't have a feedback group for parents, so we created it at that time, which helped us also to design how it was going to look. We talked to a whole lot of people, IROs and other people, and we got support from everybody. Everybody was really excited at the possibility of implementing it. We had support from our members and our DCS, of course. We created a steering group which involved, the young person, foster carers, and families, but the IRO service was involved as well, and also a practice development group which was responsible for ironing out any practice issues that came up and helping to contribute to the practice framework that was being created. So really a lot of work in implementing and in setting it up in order to get it right. Because if you don't get it right when you're setting it up, it becomes very difficult later. So you've got to have all that, all the structures in place, if you can, in order to get things moving. And of course, the support that we got from Family Rights Group with a consultant that was linked to us was really helpful as well. Since implementing it, there were a lot of challenges to overcome. At first, it was really difficult to get any referrals in. People were worried about placement instability. And often, we were told that a young person is going through a difficult time and they couldn't possibly start. But what emerged later was that actually, often having those relationships developed, understanding their history and doing that life story work through using genograms and other things, it really helped to young people to feel more settled, and as they met their links with the extended family, that often made a lot of difference, because when the coordinator went out, they got photos, they got stories, young people understood where they came from, which really helped with that. There were lots of worries from foster carers about the dangers with birth families, but we have also many really wonderful stories of foster carers working with birth family. Often when children go missing, usually they go, they were going missing to go back home, and the foster carer having that relationship with the birth family meant that there was no need for that. The foster carer would know where the young person is because they'll be talking to the birth family, which was really, really good. There was worries about introducing children to the abusers, and I think that was one of the main issues that we had all to worry about at the beginning. But putting the right structures in place and making sure that before we know the history of the people that we're introducing, and where necessary police checks are completed in a timely way, that has also helped to prevent that. So, our IROs, the IROs in Hertfordshire, were one of the first people to really jump onto this, and they were really excited about it, and they helped us to design and create it in our authority. And of course, they were the first people to give us referrals, to tell us which young person, because they know the young person well, they've been involved a long time, and they know which young person they hold reviews for, who's got no contact with their family. They also, after we've done, after we've gone through the process that Sean showed you, and we came to the end, and we had our family group conference, or the Lifelong Link celebration. 30 odd people at a time are coming to celebrate that event with young people from the extended family, and the foster carer is there, which really links those two worlds together. But following that, the IRO and the social worker meet together to go through the plan and just see where it goes from there. And the IRO is really important in the reviews, in just checking that the plan is being implemented. We have developed ways within LCS to make sure that plan is linked directly into the PMR and the child's care plan. So it's all a seamless process in that way. And of course, the IROs are involved and are part of the implementation group and the practice development group. So really exciting to see that. And the wins are the ones that you've heard already from the previous speakers. One of the things that Lifelong Links, really does is give the young people that emotional stability. That having all those relationships really helps to build their identity. So it's been a real win. We had problems with placement stability in the past, but over the last 2 or 3 years, we haven't had that problem. Our placement stability figures have been really stable at a very low rate, and part of that is because of how much we've introduced and supported young people to have those relationships with their family, and just brought those two worlds together so that a young person is a young person, and they enjoy their family life in both the foster placement as well as the home placement. So that's really made a lot of difference. But it's also transformed how we think and how we view relationships for young people. One of the things we thought about when we started to see the gains was to say, actually, why wait until a young person is in care to start thinking about relationships? Why not think about that as soon as the young person comes in as a referral right at the front door? Do we know who's in the extended family? How much are we using, genograms and echo maps and just exploring a young person's network? Actually, in fact, why do we have child protection conferences where extended family are told, only one person can come in to support? Why not bring the lot? And the support can be done right at the beginning, not wait until the relationships are lost. And actually, when we have family group conferences in proceedings, why do we say that, why are we only looking for someone who can look after the child? Why not think about, well, you can't look after the child, but should the child not return home, who's going to support the young person and be that relationship, and how are we going to maintain those relationships? There's so many people that come forward to say we would like to care for a child, but for many reasons can't. What happens to those relationships, and how do we maintain that? So there's a lot to think about and a lot to change within our system and how we think, and we've tried to change how we think about placement stability in general as well. We now hold family group conference for foster care, for stability, not because we want to return children home, but because we want children to be stable within a foster placement and have the support that they need. So, and when we are thinking of returning children home, we're also thinking relationships. So, it's really transformed how we work, and the GENOPRO system has been, is used not just for Lifelong Links, but generally from the beginning to the end. So there's been many wins for Lifelong Links.
Brilliant, thanks so much, Tenda.
I would recommend it to any authority that would like to implement it. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks so much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rachel, and I'm a foster carer in Kent. I have a child who's been in permanent placement, and he's part of the disability team. So he's a young man who's got learning difficulties, he's got autism. He's non-verbal, and he has difficulty in understanding what's going on around him. And we met Lifelong Links in 2018. And I met Andrew, and he came over to meet our boy, and we talked about Lifelong Links. And really, is for IROs to know, it's actually a really simple process. When we met, Andrew came round, and we all talked. We talked about how Lifelong Links could work for us, and we thought we saw it as an investment in our child, and how we could see for the future, because obviously, with disability, we see it as not just as the child is with us, today, but we're seeing it into the future as well, and what's going to happen in adulthood, and how we're going to keep linked in, and with children with autism. It's about people who know them, really. It's not about people, coming in and out. And unfortunately, children with disability have an awful lot of carers. They have a massive turnover of adults in their life. And actually, Lifelong Links makes sure that we can keep a consistent number of people in their life that know them and know them really well. So when we looked at putting people together for our child, it was looking at family members that didn't understand the condition but wanted to still be part of it, and his birth family wanted to be part of it as well, and then we looked at our own family, and we looked at friends as well. And for us, it was mainly about how they would feel about being with him, and whether or not they could understand him, and how we help them to understand him, and how they can keep him safe. I mean, he needs very firm boundaries, and it's about being able to set them in. And so that was the makeup of our group. And then Andrew put us all together, and we worked in and really they were a mediator. The family was very fractured, and I knew it was very fractured. The social workers knew it was very fractured, but actually we weren't going to mend it. What was really good is having a neutral group that would come in and actually set their own boundaries about what Lifelong Links was, and actually setting realistic goals about how people are going to stay in contact, and how that would look in reality. And I thought, and that worked really, really well, and it helped really set a nice calm tone. And actually the meeting was quick, it was easy, and goals were set, and they've been retained, to be honest. So and now our child's got really good links with family, with friends, with with a wide group of people, which is fantastic. It's exactly what he needs for moving into, he's now going into teenager, and he'll go on to adult social services, and and that needs to stay with him. And so really my main message to all the IROs is that this is, Lifelong Links is an investment in children, and it's really, really important. And it's not just children in foster care. A lot of disabled children live in residential supported living, and it really needs to be looked at. And so yes, let's invest in them. Let's help them, keep people they know into their adulthood, and and keep them safe, really.
Absolutely. And I think, Rachel, as well, one of the things you were saying was that how important the meeting was as well. But since then, Lifelong Links hasn't ended at the point of the FGC. It's continued to grow. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about kind of that and your role kind of within that as well.
All right. So my role, I suppose, as his foster mum, I keep all the links together. So I keep, I take pictures of him, and then I send them to his family. I contact family. We take them to see the family. We do family contacts, but our friends as well are really stay very connected with us. And within that, we've also got friends, and we've made them part of his life as well. And and we were very honest right from the word go, and we said, listen, the reason we want you to be in is because you're going to be in for good. It's not just a 5-minute thing. We really need you, because anything could happen to me and Stephen, and then we need people that know him, and that would eventually he would have, we're looking at a trust for him, and that trust will be a set of a group of people that would look at him, keep him financially safe, keep him safeguarding safe. They would and when it comes to lots of things going on in his life, I will know that he will be looked after, and that's the main reason for Lifelong Links for us.
Brilliant.
And we're utilising it well.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you. I'm going to move on to Pamela. Pam.
All right.
Sorry, Pam.
Right, yes, only my mother calls me Pamela, Sharon, so I'm in trouble. I'm going to keep this really brief so that we've got enough time for the questions at the end. But just to explain what family rights groups, what we can offer you and what we can offer local authorities in terms of support. So we offer family group conference, consultancy and training, and we offer Lifelong Links consultancy and training. So consultancy days are, we've got a package of support that can be adapted to each local authority. And it's it's Andrew and another practice advisor who would be doing the sort of individual work with each local authority, and we help you set up the steering group, which Tendai spoke about, which is really critical to effective implementation of Lifelong Links. And we help you think about stakeholder support. It's really important that the local planning and implementation group has the right people around the table, Lifelong Links has worked so well in Hertfordshire because you've got buy-in from the Director of Children's Services right through to coordinators, and they've had a really effective steering group from the beginning, and worked, as Tendai explained, really well in terms of ensuring stakeholder buy-in from parents, children, care leavers, foster carers. So that's worked really, really well. We offer impact reports to local authorities, which can, again, we do a kind of a group impact report which we publish, and we also do a bespoke impact report for each local authority. We help you think through referrals, so which children do you want to offer lifelong links to? So although our ambition, our aim at FRG is that every child in care is offered lifelong links, our greater ambition is that we are all out of a job and lifelong links isn't needed because of the work that Tendai is describing, that you're thinking family and we don't lose these connections for children. So this, why wait to think about relationships and connections, and asking children from the beginning who's important to them. So we've spoken a bit about the speakers have spoken about some of the stories and some of the practice examples, but some, I mean, Isabel Trowler was saying that Lifelong Links pushes that boundary about what is it not professional to keep in touch with a child when actually that relationship may be really important for the child when the chemistry is right, and so kind of pushing the boundary on that. So Lifelong Links does involve ex-foster carers, ex-IROs, ex-social workers. We've had directors of children's services saying, oh, I've always been in touch with that child, but it's never been as part of a plan. So it's really pushing the boundaries on that. We've had taxi drivers at family group Lifelong Links conferences, and we've had dogs, pets, whoever's important to the child should be at that meeting. We offer coordinated training. I won't go through all of this, but the access to resources we can discuss at any time. We've got various practice guidance that we're developing. The social connections tool, as we've referenced. We have manager meetings and practitioner meetings for Lifelong Links and for FGC coordinators. And then we've also got FGC. We run the national accreditation system for family group conferences. And we also have a similar accreditation framework for Lifelong Links. Can I just have the next slide? That will take me 30 seconds. And this is basically for any local authority who either is interested in developing FGCs or in thinking about Lifelong Links. Just get in touch with us. We'll be really happy to speak to you. And this flowchart really describes the work that we would then start to do with you and
brilliant.
your senior leadership team.
Pam, we've caught up on time. Well done.
And so I think we've caught up on time.
Fantastic run through. So what we're going to do now then is open up the floor to any questions or comments people have. I have been watching the chat messaging thread, so I can pull out some key bits there, but let's just open up the floor if anyone wants to put their hand up and come in. While I'm giving you a moment then to kind of think about whether you want to come in and make a comment, so I'm just going to read through a couple of points here. So we've had someone saying really important points about practice wisdom, coming up within the chat messaging thread about risk-averse culture and children, making the point that children are individuals and their care plans should be individual to them. And I think that was off the back of some exchange about, for one, the language of kind of contact and an emphasis on trying to replace that with, family time. Or something, a language that's makes more sense to children and young people, but also not getting kind of fixed around standards for the amount of contact, for example, a child should have when they're in a long-term fostering placement. Really making sure that our plans are evidence-based, and by that meaning that they're based around our solid understanding of the child's needs. yeah, lots of people saying, you know, we really should encourage family connections from the get-go, just as Tenzai and other people have said throughout. Lots of thanks, like I said, throughout the chat thread to all of our guest speakers today, and particularly to, you know, Ethan. There are a lot of comments there in terms of Ethan. And then someone's asked here, I mean, the process of trying to forge links for a child with older siblings who are now adults who were adopted, and they're struggling around the process of confidentiality and how they avoid any breaches around that. So they've kind of posed a question around that. I wondered whether anyone might be able to comment, Pam.
Sean, do you want to answer that one on the practice? Got the guidance on that, haven't we?
In terms of the question, there's a question around about risk.
Sibling. This one about siblings. So when you've got one sibling, you want it in terms of confidentiality between siblings.
Yeah, I think as with any sort of movement forward, I mean, we've had cases where there's been one sibling who wants to move forward with lifelong links and another sibling who doesn't. And I think it's then for the coordinator to sort of move very kind of gradually forward with the work and be mindful of the position of the other sibling and how that might impact on them. So I think as with any of the work, it's to move very kind of gradually forward and in a way that is collaborative with everybody that may be impacted, and to have particularly those kind of key decision makers going forward. So you wouldn't be doing any, moving forward with any of the work without having a conversation, certainly with the social worker, with the carer, and be looking at how it might impact more widely as well. So, it's very kind of careful, gradual work is how I would describe it. Does anybody want to add to that?
No, I think that's
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, thanks, Pam.
Sharon, can I answer the question about safeguarding, which is the last question in the chat? Is that all right? So there's a question about how, and just about the safeguarding, and I think with lifelong links, the relationship between the coordinator and the social worker has to be really strong. It's a close working relationship. So the social worker would do the checks as they would in any other situation for a child they're working with. I think that sometimes the result is that the young person realises as part of the work that's done who they can't have contact with, who it isn't safe for them to see. So we've put a link up in the chat to an audio clip, which is from Radio 4, and there's one young man in that who talks about the fact he now knows who he can see and who he can't see. So that's, again, part of the work from the coordinator.
Okay, and we've got
but yeah, it's critical that work is done.
Has their hands up? Thank you. Yes, yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for a very insightful discussion on this lifelong links. I particularly want to direct my question to Tendai, because she alluded to some of this in her presentation. The difficulties that you encounter at the beginning when you are trying to introduce or maintain family links is what I want her to draw a bit more attention to, because normally what you hear is that, yes, because they've missed a few family time sessions, it is traumatizing for the children, and you have to balance that. And because of that, some people go to the extent of even going for no contact orders to some of these links. And then before you realize, when children come out of care, they've got no family links at all. So at the beginning, when it is fresh, it is raw, when perhaps the pressure is on families to try and care for the children rather than even maintain the links, how do they maintain the balance? How do they change it from the focus of, well, don't feel guilty about not being able to offer long-term care, but you could still stay involved without, and also you hear, especially parents don't want their family members to have any links because of the shame of the fact that the families are still connected to their children. I don't know whether they encountered this and how they addressed this.
Thanks for that, Kwako. I think, each young person goes through such complex situations, and each case requires that wisdom as to the best way forward. So in terms of working with families, just in proceedings and coming up and saying, you can't offer long-term care, but could you remain involved with the child? I think, so important to have those conversations at that time. There is, as you say, lots of guilt, and sometimes in some circumstances, it might be worth waiting a little bit until the proceedings are finished and then going back to approach the families. So as a local authority, you can use different methods. Either you do it right there and then while you're having your final family group conference, or you wait until later to do it. One of the things we're learning in Hertfordshire is to remain involved with families. Often once the order is given, we take it that we are done with the, and we're just proceeding with the plan as agreed, six times a year contact and so forth. But what we've learned is we've got to maintain those relationships and continue to work with the Beth family, because at some point they'll be ready. And in terms of the young person, sometimes they are not ready as soon as you've moved them. So you've got to move at the young person's pace as well. Maybe they are ready a bit later. Maybe when we approach them to offer lifelong links, they tell you that they're not ready at all. So it all differs very much according to young person, and we try to be very much young person led. But we also want to create a system that's ready to provide that support to the young person as soon as they are ready to take it up. One of the things we also do is to look wider than the mom and dad. Often their cousins, their family that live overseas, or their teachers or other people that could remain in contact with the young person while the immediate family are not in a position to do so. So it's important to think more widely about the word family and about the word connections for young people. Some young people will have a stronger relationship with their coach, football coach, or even, their head teacher at primary school. And if they can't have that relationship with their immediate family, at least they still have those connections and somebody who cares about them to give them that support in the long term. So I hope it answers your question.
Thank you. And I see, Pam, that someone has
Absolutely.
raised
Thank you very much.
Question about the cost of this work, and you've effectively answered that within the messaging thread there. So do have a look at that, folk. I had a question, actually. It was kind of a comment and a question as much as anything. I was thinking about children's racial identity, culture, heritage, and the well-known problems in terms of stigma, bullying, racism, the difficulties finding suitable matches for many of our children, and whether anyone had any thoughts about how we could better address that, both as IROs in terms of the care planning and review process, but also to offer comment again about lifelong links.
I mean, I think there are lots of examples in lifelong links, certainly, of lifelong links finding never found family, or family that children have lost touch with from overseas, from different parts of the country. So then in terms of the finding from the recent evaluation about it helping identity, so children have a much improved sense of identity. So that's absolutely part of the work.
I think just to add to that, I think with some of the case examples of where I can think of an example for one of the North of England authorities where siblings produced kind of memory boxes for the third child who'd had no contact with these siblings for something like 13 or 14 years. So they produced a kind of boxes that were full of little sort of bits of information about the history and about the family history. So that kind of is a great sort of way of sharing sort of cultural, common sort of cultural sort of experience.
So
we've
got a few minutes left. Any other thoughts or comments from anyone? People are generally saying, you know, this has been really, really helpful. A really, really helpful session. So, like I say, thanks so much again to the Family Rights Group and all the speakers. Come in, Pam.
Actually, can I just add, sorry, Sharon. Sorry, because I think there was an earlier thing about adoption, and just to say that so there is specific practice guidance for lifelong links coordinators who are working with children where adoption is a feature, and we're sort of building on that at the moment as well. But it obviously has to be done very carefully, and you have to bring in your kind of the legal advice from your authority. But I think actually the story that Sean is talking about, the practice example he's talking about, was where one of the children had been adopted and that had broken down, and she then reconnected with her birth mum and siblings. So I mean, there are some, we could talk for another hour and a half about some of the amazing stories and family members who have been waiting for that call. There was a grandmother who was waiting and showed the coordinator presents from birthday and Christmas that she'd had. She's waiting for the call. I've asked Andrew to put into the chat, we've got another film that foster carers in North Yorkshire did for us, and it's really powerful. And that, you know, and one of those young people was talking about worrying about her mum for 6 years, hadn't seen her mum for 6 years. And Stuart Carlton, the director in North Yorkshire, was saying, so even, you know, they're Ofsted outstanding authority, but he was saying, if we still got children here who are worrying about their parents, and why wasn't she having contact with her mum? And as we've been discussing, just revisiting some of those decisions. I know in some of the Lifelong Link services, they've talked about you know, why we're having supervised contact, really reviewing that. We may need that with a baby and whatever, but actually when the child's 15, but we still just keep going with the same contact plan, family plan. So I would, have a look at the foster care film. And there is our newest film, which you may have seen on social media, but it's lovely. And again, goes to your kind of comment about identity and heritage. And so it's a little, from the perspective of a 9-year-old from Ghana. She's got family in Ghana. It's a lovely little film to watch, 2 minutes. Have a look at our website and do contact us if you want to find out any more information.
And quite a few really good examples of coordinators making contact with family members from overseas as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really powerful stories. And Rachel, you know, what you have to say about really investing in the child, and I guess that's been kind of echoed as a sentiment throughout today's session, hasn't it, really? And as you were just saying there, Pam, you know, again, which again emphasises the important role of the IRO in constantly, you know, critically reviewing the child's care plan to make sure that it absolutely is up to date, that it really is meeting that child's needs, that we've got a good, solid understanding of that child's needs. And the best way that we can achieve that is making sure that we've got the right people around that child, that we're having those conversations in order that we can critically review things like family time, those relationship connections. And okay. So we're 11 o'clock. That's been a fantastic session. Like I say, I want to thank all of our guest speakers today.